Hello, Delia here. So glad you're clicking on. So in this episode, we're going to talk about your voice again. It's a big topic, and there's a lot of aspects to it. Um, so one of the things that was coming up to talk about today is the idea that you're supposed to know who you are. um, like you're supposed to have a list of um, you're this way, you're that way, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. The same way by the eighth grade, you're supposed to have an aptitude test to tell you what you're going to do for the rest of your life. I don't know if they still do that or not, but the idea that's kind of bombarding everybody is that at some point you're supposed to know who you are, and that's supposed to be a finite, unchanging thing. And the unchanging is a big part of it. It's like when I'm 35, I'm gonna be the mother of so and so, or I'm gonna whatever. When I'm 45, I'll have this in the bank, or I'll own this property, or I'll have the corner office. When I'm 55, blah blah blah. 65, 75. And so each one of these markers is a arbitrary and be not really related to anything except projections of where you should. So I'm doing the should with the air quotes because there's a great thing about never stop shoulding on yourself. Shoulding, shoulds are projections. They're at best they're kind of moral compass guidance, and at worst, which is how they are most common, they're based on what something looks like and what somebody else judges how you should be or where you should be. If you ever entertain the idea, meaning just get curious about what is that based on? I should this, I should that. Why? Based on what? So when I was in high school years ago, um, towards the end of high school, there was this thing where the girls were wanting to get married and planning on getting married and anxious to get married. And it was all about getting married, and it was time. In fact, I had a guy ask me to marry him once, and I said, I like you a whole lot, but why are you asking me to marry you? And why are you asking me now? And he said, well, it's time that I got married. I'm like, based on what? Who told you that and why did you believe it? So there's a lot of things that we do in our life based on what other people told us we were supposed to do and who we were supposed to be. So these are definitions and conclusions and assumptions, and that are then projected at us. And every one of those has an energy. It's going to be registered in your body. Even if you don't think that you're psychically aware, even if you don't think that you're energetically aware, you are, and you use it all the time, and you may have different names for it. A lot of people call it being perceptive or having a gut feeling or being intuitive, but it's all the same thing. So if you have an idea that by this age, whatever age it is, whatever age you are, you should know who you are. That should is going to be really harsh, and it's going to prevent you from being able to see, to explore, to discover who you are right now. So, we've done this before where these are like filters. And so when you're shoulding yourself, you can't see what is because you're just seeing what you should. Everything that brings up and lets down, let's destroy and uncreate at all times the Godzillion. Destroy, de-story, take the story apart, let the story disintegrate. Destroy, de-story, disintegrate, and erase. Destroy, de-story, disintegrate, and erase. Just allow that energy to start to unfurl, just disintegrate. So if you're navigating by shoulds, you're navigating by judgment. And if you're navigating by judgment, you can't see what is. And that's not an opinion, that's a fact. A judgment is like this filter, and therefore you can only see the judgment. And you can't see what is because of the judgment. So if you're of a certain age and you have this programming, this conclusion, this training that says that you should know who you are, then to be in a state of curiosity about who you are would be bad and wrong. And when you're in a state of curiosity, you're alive, you're engaged, it's an adventure. And you're also present in the present time. So another thing about shoulding on yourself, especially about who are you, is if you have think back, you know what it was like to be a teenager and you had definite ideas about everything, including what it would be like to be 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 or 60. And you had a really strong demarcation line of where old was. It's probably close to 30. And then after that, it was like this horrible no man's land that you didn't have any imaginings about or didn't want to have anything to do with. And then when you get closer to that age, you can have kind of some sense of disappointment because you aren't where your 17-year-old said you should be. And when you think about it like that, it's like, oh, well, I shouldn't feel bad because, what did my 17-year-old self know? In the wisdom category and the energetic category, your 17-year-old may have known a lot of stuff. But when it came to that kind of self involved, self invested idea about where you should be at a certain time, and then projecting that, it's usually out of insecurities. And so, where the 17-year-old projected you should be at a certain point is not necessary. It's certainly not based on today's choice. And your choice and your wisdom for you today is much more informed. It's better than what your 17-year-old was demanding of you, was projecting, was judging you for or against. So, what does all this have to do with your voice? Well, if you're trying to live down to whatever your 17-year-old said you should be doing, as opposed to saying that as living up to it, because it's a limited perspective and it's wrought with insecurities. So you're making yourself try to live down to the projections of a 17-year-old. It's going to be uncomfortable and it's going to be a lose, lose, lose. The 17-year-old came up with those ideas out of a losing lie of trying to get away from feeling bad, which is based on judgments. So it's not accurate. And then if today you're upset because you're not where you should be, chances are you're not where you should be based on that 17-year-old. So everything that is, do you choose to destroy and uncreate at all times the Godzillion? Yes, I choose that. Destroy, destroy, disintegrate, and erase. So all of these are impediments to your being able to access, discover, and use your voice for your creations, for your greatness. And n- greatness has nothing to do with being over anybody or public accolade. It's not ego. It's you're an infinite being. You're already great. And uh, in the competitive world, somebody has to be better than somebody else, and therefore greatness might sound egotistical or domination. And it's not any of that. A daisy is great, and it's not trying to be better than anybody. But to deny the intrinsic greatness of a daisy is an untruth. And there's a greatness of you. You're an infinite being. You have this fantastic body. And to minimize that, to make somebody else's judgment feel better is not really useful. So your voice is an expression of your greatness, and your greatness is all it's the sum total of all of you. It's your quirkiness, it's your weirdness, it's your uniqueness, because nobody sees things the way you do. Nobody sees the world the way you do. Nobody would spend money the way you would. And money actually requires you to spend it the way that you would because you do it differently than how anybody else. You would invest in different things. Um, some of you would invest in shares of Monsanto to change their business practices. Then some of you would use your money to support local artists. There's just a ton of different ways that your uniqueness is expressed. And it's best if you have the underlying notion of your uniqueness as a greatness. You're just, you're an infinite being. Of course, you're great. And anything that doesn't allow that, do you destroy and uncreate at all times the godzillion? Yes, I choose that. Destroy, destroy, disintegrate, and erase. So your voice is unique because you are unique and you perceive uniquely. And if you're hobbled by some idea of who you're supposed to be, then you cannot be in an exploration, which is an adventure, which has a lot of lively energy to it, of who you are now. And who are you separate from all of your roles? I mean, who are you if you're not your father's daughter? If you're not your mother's daughter? If you're not your brother's sister? If you're not your sister's sister? If you're not your child's mother? If you're not your grandmother's granddaughter, grandson, whatever. If you're not your role, who are you? I remember when I had the first time I had that question, it was phrased a little differently. And I was 17 or 18, and I was out in California on a adventure. And to make some money along the way, I was doing uh, I was cleaning houses, on a day labor kind of a basis, temp job. And the only house I went to come lunchtime, the elderly couple, probably in their 50s, maybe in their 60s, uh, had me sit down with them for lunch. And the lady was really sweet, and she was gently asking some questions. And then she finally asked me, "What are you doing cleaning houses? You're obviously, raised differently than that." And I can't remember how she phrased it, but what got through to me was, um, "Who do you think you are?" And it wasn't in a mean way. It was like, what I came away with was, if I'm not my family, then who am I? And I was terrified because I did not have an answer. I knew exactly who I was as far as being my father's daughter and my mother's daughter and my sister's sister and my brother's brother, and our place in the neighborhood and in the community that we were in, but I had no idea who I was otherwise. And there was something very shameful about that. Like, you should always know who you are. And the truth is, and this is part of is one of the things that I'm really grateful for the COVID period, is that people are really unpacking and unpretending that they know who they are. And they're discovering, okay, if I can't be my job on a for 40 hours a week, then who am I during those 40 hours a week? And there's a lot of discovery that's going on. And a lot of that discovery has to do with um, who are you? And by extension, what's your voice? So it's actually a very exciting time and an exciting question of, what would it be like to uncover and discover your voice? And what would that give you? What would that be like? What would it um, how would your life be if you were being you and if you were voicing you? So to be in the question, to be in the exploration, and to engage with the autopilot responses and ask, really? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe that's the way I am. Maybe, how am I now? How am I now? And what that does is it gives you the freedom to be who you be today, and to stop trying to be what um, your father's daughter inside you tells you to be, or your mother's daughter, and to stop being what your father or mother, sister, brother, husband, kids. I mean, we get a lot of pictures from our kids about who we're supposed to be and how we're supposed to be. And they're very inaccurate. They're just as inaccurate as the pictures and the projections of our own 17-year-old on us about what we're supposed to be at different ages. And kids don't really see their parents as people. Um, I don't know many people who have, even adults, who really see their parents for who they are, as opposed to who they are in relationship to the kid. So everything that brings up and lets down, let's destroy and uncreate at all times a godzillion. Destroy, destroy, disintegrate, and erase. So the question of your voice, and reclaiming your voice and discovering your voice and what's your voice like now, it's actually very exciting and enlivening and empowering. So I hope this has given you some space, some more space to be you. And I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.